Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee. I am broadcasting today from San Francisco Airport. It's just a matter of scheduling. This is where I am. So you'll hear overhead speakers, you'll hear people in the background, and this is the way we do it. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about being in the messy middle. So I would love for you to share where you're coming from today. And also, how do you deal with being in this messy middle of change? And if you think about a chart, the way that we think change management, the way we plan for it to happen, is that you start at the beginning, you know where you are, and then you plot this line. This is how we're going to change, and it's going to be great plans, and we're going to be smooth sailing, right? Yeah, right. That doesn't work. Instead, what happens is you begin to change, and it gets really messy. We're grappling with it. We're trying to figure out how to make things work. Things like technology may not be working very well. People may be resisting it, and you know it's just going to be a mess. So what happens when we know this is how change happens? We avoid it. We don't want to go through it. We know it's going to be messy. We know it's going to be really hard. So we do everything to say, until we really have to go through this change, we're just not going to do it. We just don't want to have to do this. So how do you figure out how to deal with the messy middle, and in particular have the strength and resilience to not be worn down by it? I think about it as this desire to find balance. We want it to be smooth. We want it to be not discombobulating. We want it to not be a hard and stressful thing for people. And the way I think about it is, the reality is we know it's going to be hard, and we know we're going to be stretching ourselves. We're going to be stretching ourselves beyond what we feel comfortable in order to change, because otherwise we would have just changed and we wouldn't be where we are today. But we know we have to go into this messy middle. We know we're going to be stretched. The key is not to be stressed. So there's a difference between being stretched and stressed. And that's what I want to talk about today, is how do you remain focused, determined, knowing that this is going to be hard work, but not to the point where it's going to be so hard that you run into so many obstacles that you back away from that, give up, and go back to home base. Because when you're stressed, when you're feeling those stress hormones popping up, and it's no longer energizing but depleting, then we know that we have to do a better job of dealing and being in this messy middle. So I do want to be very intentional about using the word balance, because balance assumes that if you just treat things just the right way, that if you go and are careful about how you do things, that you can maintain this equilibrium. And balance isn't the right word. I think about it as harmony. And I have a musical background. And the way I think about harmony, especially if someone's singing along the high melody line, if someone comes in and starts to harmonize, they have to try a lot of different things. You can't sing the top harmony line, but you have to be constantly trying and modulating along the way to try to find that harmony. It's a give and take, it's going back and forth, and sometimes, honestly, it's kind of messy. But eventually, you get better at it, and the more you practice it, the better you're able to harmonize on the fly. So that's how we think about this: is how do you actually harmonize and know that you're going to have to be constantly adjusting and modulating how you're working through this change, knowing that it's going to be messy, but not trying to take away all of that, because we know that we have to change, we have to grow, and that's not going to happen by staying firmly in our comfort zone. So, a couple things I want to do before we get into the meat of how to do this. I want to say there's a lot of you here today. Thank you for commenting. So we've got Lisa Bio. Hey, Lisa, how are you doing? Welcome from Celebration in Florida. Marissa from Seattle. We got a lot of other people here. Fernando, also from Florida and Miami. And have some comments too about how people stay balanced and harmonizing and focused in this space. So Marissa says, I think it's fitting that this is today's topic at the airport. Yeah, this is a little bit discombobulating. Got to find the spot, deal with overheads, and yeah, I'm maintaining harmony, if not quite. It's going to go all the way perfectly. That was not planned, by the way, Marissa. It just happened to be that way. Jay shares one of the ways he figures this out is having a compass, a map, a North Pole, and North Star. And we'll definitely talk about that in a second. Let's see, other comments. And Lisa says, how to stay centered, yoga, meditation, and I love this, wine. Always a good thing to get a little bit of perspective. So what I want to go into today is a little bit about how do you maintain that harmony. And the first steps, I just have a couple tips here today. One of the things to think about is being clear about your definition of success. So to Jay's point, being really clear, we're going to embark on this journey. We're starting here today, and we're going to go to this new place. Where is that new place? And we have a path along the way. We may have to take detours, but this is the map we're going to go on. This is the journey we're embarking on. And one of the hardest things to do is to accept that this is a journey we want to go on. So this acceptance, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the new ways of how to manage change in next week's live stream. But today I want to talk about just even accepting the fact that we're going to go on this journey, committing yourself to saying, yes, we believe that this is the journey to go on. I oftentimes talk about this archetype of people in an organization who I call the worried skeptics. They're just like, I know we have to go on this, but look at all these obstacles, look at all these problems. I don't know. This is the right thing to do. I'm really worried about this. What's in it for me? And the thing to say to them, like, you're absolutely right. Those are all obstacles. We have to address them and work through those things. But the key is they have to be accepting that we are going to go on this journey. It is not a choice of whether we stay back at home or we're going to go. And if they can't accept that this is a journey, this is the strategy, this is the place where we want to be, and that this is the journey that we're going to go on, then you have to have a different conversation with them and say, then you shouldn't come along this journey. We really appreciate you having been with us up to this point, but now it's time for you to go. You need to get off the bus. Because you can't have people going along the way who say, I do not want to go on this journey. I don't believe it's the right thing. So having an understanding of where they are in that belief of your definition of success is absolutely key, because you can't have these distractors say, why are we doing this? We can't be honest. It's one thing to say, I'm worried, how are we going to get over this? I know we have to go there. But if they're not even buying into where that vision is, then it's a different conversation you have to have. So moving into the messy middle, so important to make sure that you have people who want to be in there. The second thing is to accept and prepare for the journey. I climbed this huge hike in Yosemite about a decade ago called Half Dome. And it is an all-day journey. You start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and hopefully you get down the mountain before the sun sets, because you don't want to be on the mountain when the sun sets. And you don't just get up off your couch and go on that big hike. You go on smaller hikes, you do a lot of stairs, you pack water, you pack food, you pack gloves to climb up the cables at the end. And so you're preparing yourself for this journey. In the same way, you need to prepare yourselves and your team to be able to go on this. So lots of little hikes, lots of places where you can have these messy middles, go into this messy place and build your confidence that you can go into that messy place and come out of it whole and intact. There's nothing better than that. And the third thing I would say is, as you're going along that journey, when you're in the messy middle, take breaks, constantly recharge yourself, gather around with each other. It's like, wow, look at this. Let's celebrate how far we've come, rather than focus on just how far we still have to go. Because when you're doing this together, and remember, and you're in that messy middle, this is a key thing, is that when you are together, you're clear on that goal you want to be on, you're accepting it, you're prepared, you're there to support each other in your moments of tiredness, and you're taking breaks together to reassess where you are on that map. And the last thing I would say is it's really important to build that team, to build that tribe, because there's nothing like going on a journey, going through that messy middle, than knowing that you're doing it with other people who are aligned with you, who want to go on this journey, and that you know that even though it's going to be hard, you'll be doing it together. It just makes it so much easier. So this is a key part about that investment again, before you go into this messy middle, making sure that your team is as strong as possible, that the leaders are aligned, that they believe in this, that They are going to have each other's back instead of saying, well, I told you that this is going to be hard. Why are we on this journey? So making sure that everyone is aligned in that way, that everyone is solid and are going to back each other up is absolutely key. So I just want to pause and see if there are any questions and comments here. I have this one comment from Jay. He says, a little bit of humor goes a long way. And a compass and a map won't do much at the North Pole. You are being guided by fuel as much as anything else. So that's a good point. When you're at the North Pole, how will you know that you're actually there? Let's see. Marissa goes, yeah, Half Dome is huge. Yeah, it was a good thing. I was actually doing a lot that summer. I was training for a triathlon, so the physical fitness was really high. So I said, oh, why not? Let's go climb Half Dome while we're at it. So that is again, you don't do things like triathlons and climbing like big mountains like Half Dome just by on the spur of the moment. You prepare, you train, you have that confidence then that you can get through that. And for those of you who have been there, the worst part wasn't the climbing part. It was the switchbacks back and forth through the never-ending forest for 2.5 hours. Like, when is this going to end? That was the psychologically hardest part of the hike. Here's another question, comment from Paula. How to identify risk on any job, costing profit for any business, for example. This is, again, one of the parts of preparation. What are the obstacles we're going to have as we're going through this messy middle? Where are the challenges going to be? What are the risks we're going to have? Having those contingency plans and the contingency plans for the contingency plans. So as you're setting off on this journey, you know you want to get to this place, this compass, this map. But as you're going along, when you face an obstacle, are you going to just run into that obstacle and try to go through it? If you can't, go back to home base, or will you find ways around it, take detours, and prepare for the fact that you may have to take some significant detours? So those are all parts of the planning. And when I look at companies like Adobe, who went through a huge transformation going from packaged software over into the cloud back in 2013, 2014, one of the things they did was have all of these contingency plans. And they had them in great detail, and they knew what they were across the organization. So that gave them a lot of confidence that even if things were to go sideways or to go backwards, they knew that they had ways to course correct, and get back on the path again. And here's a great comment from Marissa. Focusing on the yet to do can be debilitating. So it's important to pace out activities. And that's such a great point, Marissa, because I think we oftentimes get overwhelmed by how much there is to do, which is why I really like focusing on the sort of get things done approach from David Allen. What's the next action we can take? Rather than try to focus and see the entire project plan that you have for change, what's the next thing that we can do? What's the next decision we can make? And what's the minimum amount of data? I call it the minimally viable data that you need to have in order to make that next decision. Because at that point, when you make that decision, rather than be paralyzed to make a perfect decision, you're making the best decision that you can with the data and the information that you have right now. And the key to that is knowing that you can always go back. You can always undo that decision. Because after a while, you're in the messy middle. You don't know what things are going to work. And because you accept that things are messy, you know that sometimes you make a decision. It's the wrong decision, it turns out. But hey, we just learn a lot more about what's going to work, so we can go someplace else and do the other thing. So that is such a great point, Marissa, to say, instead of focusing on yet to do, instead of focusing on what all the risks are, let's focus on what are the decisions we can make right now to make that messy middle more acceptable and be more in harmony. So one of the last things I think, that my fifth point here, is that being in the messy middle, we tend to want to get out of it as quickly as we can. Back last summer in June, I did a whole live stream on the liminal space, and I love this idea. It's the same idea as a messy middle. You go into the space where you're in the state between what was before and what will be. And our inclination is to speed through this as quickly as possible, because it's uncomfortable. We don't like being here. We want to go back to the new status, the new normal that we want to be in. And the reality is, this is an incredibly fruitful, interesting space because we're in the state of growth, the state of being able to see lots of different opportunities. We're open to new ideas. We're much more open to change happening to us and the growth. So what is really interesting, it's the same as you're on this journey and you can take the fastest, straightest way there. But hey, you just stop by this one place. That looks like a really interesting place to go and explore because you never had seen this odd attraction that wasn't in the guidebooks. So do you stop, take that time to explore that and expand your perspective on things? And that's why I think the messy middle is such an interesting space to be, this liminal space, because it's a place of, it's a time of growth, it's a time of exploration, of challenging ourselves, stretching ourselves. But if we can maintain that harmony, that sense that we're okay, that we're going to come out of this, but remain in the messy middle for as long as you can, and look up and around to see all the open possibilities, you might find a new path, a new way that can add to that growth that you never had thought was available because you couldn't see that opportunity when you were back at your home base, back in the status quo. It just was not visible from that viewpoint. It's only when you're in this state of change, in this messy middle, that you can actually begin to see the possibilities that were never before possible. All right, just have a couple other comments from people. Marissa, we have another one. Small steps can equal forward momentum in spite of the occasional switchback. Yes, absolutely. I don't know how many times we all have thought we were on the right path and then wasn't, but hey, chalk it up for experience, because experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. So go back and be okay with that. And again, plan for those opportunities. And then Lisa has a comment. I feel like we are in or going to be in very soon the messy middle from Web 2 to Web 3. So I love Web 3. It's fascinating. I don't completely understand it. We are very much in the messy middle. Do I issue an NFT? Do I actually do one? What a DAO is going to look like? How is that going to impact us? So many different ways that Web3 can disrupt the way we even think about the world and our assumptions about how organizations work, how we have relationships with each other. Just so many things are crazy and possible right now. A lot of discussions around Web3. And Lisa, thank you for bringing that up because, man, talk about messy. It is it's a complete Wild West. And you have to be willing to go in knowing that you have no idea sometimes what you're talking about, how things are going to play out. Be okay with a lot of risk and know that you're going to be learning and growing a lot along the way. So that's what I have for today. I think that one of the most interesting things I hear from people, and again, from the organizations and the leaders I work with, is how do I minimize the messiness? How do I make it less messy so that we actually want to go on this change? And I'll talk about it next week. One of the most powerful things we can do is to build into our change management process, actually not make it a special process, but to really accept that we are always going through change. We are always going to be in this messy middle. There's no end to it. Because even by the time you get to the end, you realize there's more change that we have to go on because now we have a different perspective. We're now in this new perspective and we're saying, oh, look at all these other possibilities. We need to get going again. So being in the messy middle is something that we actually have to develop as a competence in our leadership, that we are comfortable being unclear about how everything is going to work. Because the minute we actually stop growing, we're here in stasis. And while we can do that for a little while to take a break, to gather our wits around us, to make sure everyone is here with us in this point, making sure everyone's catching up, take a breath. But we know we need to be getting going again. So being in the messy middle and being comfortable being in that messy middle is a key competence, I think, that we all have to learn and adapt over time. Let's see. And Dejanine, I think this is a great point. I try to remember that we did well in other changes and past challenges and that we'll find the way again. And that is such a great way to end today because that is the topic of what I want to talk about next week. And that is to talk about the new rules of change management. And a key part of that is remembering we went through a huge amount of change from 2 years ago. And we were really good at it. We were more resilient, more capable of creating huge amounts of change in a very short amount of time than we ever gave ourselves credit for. And now that we're back into a somewhat normal way of working again, the smallest changes that we try to do for ourselves are met with huge amounts of resistance. We go, we don't want to change. We can't do that. That's too hard. And I say to people, wait a minute, we just went through a huge amount of change. And the mindset was before with COVID, when we had to shut down, we had to do things so differently. Was it was being done to us. We had no choice. We had to rise to that occasion, and we did. Now, when we have a choice, we choose not to. And that's what I want to examine next week and really talk about how do we actually change our mindset to say, how do we move into that place faster and sooner that when we're going to see this change, it's going to be really important for us to be prepared, which is what we talked about today, to be in that messy middle and then be able to accept that this is a part of life, what we have to go do and make this change possible. I have a great question here from Libby. And again, we have a little bit of time. If you have other questions, I'll try to answer them. Do you think that abundance versus scarcity mindsets have an impact on how comfortable people are in the messy middle? Absolutely, completely. Because when you're in the messy middle, do you focus on the hard part or the opportunity? Do you focus on the fact that you have an abundance or a growth mindset? Or do you focus on all the things that we don't have anymore? When we're back in the in the safety of our home base, of our comfort zones, man, I really miss that. And we don't have that anymore. So again, there are some predispositions that people have. They tend to have more of a scarcity mindset or more of an abundance mindset. But we know from research, we know from psychology that this is a mindset that can change. And it changes primarily by being able to focus on that abundance, focus instead of what you've lost, being grateful for what you have. I've talked about in my writing, and I just wrote about it in my LinkedIn Leading Disruption newsletter, about a practice for gratitude. And when you have gratitude, not only for yourself and for the things around you, but you practice that as an organization, it actually changes your mindset from scarcity to abundance. So when you are around people who have that scarcity mindset, you can actually start changing it by being in the moment, being very present and looking at all the things you have going for you. So the practice of gratitude, I do believe, is an incredibly powerful thing to do individually, but it's also a very powerful thing to do as an organization, because you're sitting here looking at all the advantages you have, all the assets you have, the relationships with each other to carry you through those tough times. And that's where the abundance is so important. Libby, thank you for asking that question. It's a fantastic one. I'm checking to see if there are any other questions or comments at this time. There are not. So I'll also check the various feeds to see if there are any other questions. But thank you so much for the great participation today. It's been great. Thank you for putting up with me being at the airport. I think we should do this again some more times because it's kind of fun to do this. And by all means, everyone stay safe, stay well, and I'll talk to you next week about having how do you actually think about change in new and different ways. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.